The late autumn air carried a crisp chill that bit at Ethan Parker's exposed hands as he pushed open the glass doors of Riverwood Mall. The faint aroma of roasted coffee beans mingled with the tang of leather from the handbags on display, and somewhere a Christmas playlist whispered soft, nostalgic tunes. It was Thursday, and like every Thursday for the past 5 years, Ethan had taken the time to pick up something thoughtful for his mother, a ritual of quiet devotion, never too flashy but always heartfelt. He held the small, neatly wrapped package in one hand, his coffee in the other, and jangled the keys in his pocket as he stepped into the parking lot. Ethan's life at 29 was orderly, almost painfully so. Engineering projects, deadlines, precision, calculations, everything measured, everything controlled. He liked it that way. No surprises, no heartbreaks, no chaotic bursts of emotion that left him raw and exposed. His friends would have called him dependable, responsible, maybe even a little boring. But those who knew him closely knew he carried a shadow, a hollow space in his heart that had never healed. A shadow shaped like one person. As he walked toward his car, a flicker at the edge of his vision made him pause. At first, he thought it was a trick of the late afternoon light, or perhaps a reflection in the chrome of the shopping carts. Then his gaze sharpened. A young woman was crouched near the trash bins outside the food court, her hair a tangled curtain over her face, clothing worn and threadbare, her posture small and defensive, as though the world had trained her to disappear. A tin cup rested on the ground in front of her, the few coins inside rattling faintly when she shifted. Some passers-by glanced at her, averted their eyes, muttered under their breaths, or tossed a pitying nod before moving on. Ethan's steps slowed. His mind, normally preoccupied with project deadlines and grocery lists, went suddenly silent. The sight of her made his chest tighten, a sensation he hadn't felt in over a decade. Something inside him froze. Not disbelief, not even fear, but a magnetic pull, a visceral recognition that clawed at memory and memory alone. Her face, he thought. That face. He forced himself to step closer. His heart, a steady, dependable drum for so long, now pounded erratically, like it was warning him of danger or revelation or both. His eyes scanned the half-hidden features. The curve of her nose, the faint scar at the temple, the hollow sadness of her eyes. There it was, unmistakable. It was her. Melissa. Ethan's breath caught. He blinked. He could barely believe it, as if seeing her now was a cruel trick played by fate. 12 years. 12 years since she had disappeared without a word, without a goodbye, leaving him to nurse the raw, unhealed wound of first love and betrayal. He had spent countless nights questioning himself, questioning her, questioning the world. Had she loved him at all? Had he been nothing but a chapter in her story, one she closed and left behind without ceremony? But here she was, alive, real, and broken. Melissa's eyes met his, and in that instant, Ethan was transported back to the summer of 2013. Sunlight had filtered through the tall oaks that lined the park near their high school, casting dappled patterns across the freshly mown grass. They had stolen moments away from the chaos of school dances and parental supervision, sitting beneath the ancient trees, sharing secrets they swore no one else would hear. Promises of forever had been whispered in quiet voices, exchanged in laughter and stolen glances. Ethan had held her hand as they carved initials into the bark, hearts entwined in youthful certainty that nothing could ever tear them apart. And then she vanished. No explanation, no note, no warning. Just gone. Her locker emptied, her phone disconnected, her presence evaporated as though it had never existed. His friends had speculated. Perhaps she had run off with someone else. Perhaps she had chosen another path. Ethan had believed them. He had wrapped himself in that bitter assumption and carried it like armor, a shield against further heartbreak, even as the memory of her smile haunted every quiet corner of his life. Now she crouched before him, trembling, fragile, and utterly human. The cold air wrapped around them, unnoticed, as if time had slowed, leaving only this collision of past and present. He swallowed hard, feeling the weight of years pressing down. "Melissa," he whispered, almost too softly to be heard, yet loud enough that she froze, her hand still hovering above the coins in her tin cup. Her head lifted slightly, eyes widening in a mixture of recognition and fear. Her lips parted, a faint, cracked sound escaping. Shock painted every line of her face. Her breath hitched. The tin cup clattered softly as it fell to the concrete. She hadn't expected him, couldn't have. For 12 long years, she had been running, hiding, surviving, and now, suddenly, the boy she had loved and hurt by leaving stood before her, steady, unyielding, and bewildered. Ethan stepped closer, his instincts warring with his mind. Part of him wanted to scream, to demand answers, to unleash years of grief and confusion. But the other part, the deeper part, knew that screaming would only break her further. He had learned over the years that life often wounded silently, leaving invisible scars that could not be healed with anger alone. His voice was ragged, his fingers tightening around the coffee cup as if it were a lifeline. Her eyes flickered away. Shame, guilt, fear, they all played across her delicate features. For a moment, she seemed ready to vanish into the crowd, to disappear like she had before. Ethan held his ground. Her words, simple as they were, struck like a dagger and a balm at the same time. He wanted to scream at her. He wanted to demand the truth. But instead, all he could do was stand there, letting the years of misunderstanding, the bitterness, the grief wash over him in a silent tidal wave. His voice trembled now, not from anger, but from the sheer weight of 12 years of unanswered questions. Melissa's shoulders shook. A fragile laugh escaped her, bitter and broken. Ethan blinked. The world around them, the bustling mall, the careless shoppers, the distant hum of traffic, faded into a blur. All that remained was the girl he had loved, the girl he had mourned, and the inexplicable, aching pull of connection that neither time nor suffering could sever. Her words were a whisper now, not from anger, but from the sheer weight of 12 years of unanswered questions. Melissa's shoulders shook. A fragile laugh escaped her, bitter and broken. Ethan blinked. The world around them, the bustling mall, the careless shoppers, the distant hum of traffic, faded into a blur. All that remained was the girl he had loved, the girl he had mourned, and the inexplicable, aching pull of connection that neither time nor suffering could sever. Her words were a whisper now, not from anger, but from the sheer weight of 12 years of unanswered questions. Melissa's shoulders shook. A fragile laugh escaped her, bitter and broken. Ethan blinked. The world around them, the bustling mall, the careless shoppers, the distant hum of traffic, faded into a blur. All that remained was the girl he had loved, the girl he had mourned, and the inexplicable, aching pull of connection that neither time nor suffering could sever. Her words were a whisper, almost drowned by the rustling of leaves and distant footsteps. Ethan's heart stuttered. Love, after all these years? His chest felt tight, a mixture of hope, fear, and the dawning realization that perhaps, just perhaps, some connections never truly die. He wanted to reach out, to bridge the chasm of 12 years, to offer comfort, forgiveness, or perhaps something more. And yet, uncertainty held him back. One wrong move, one wrong word, and this fragile reunion could shatter like glass. Melissa's hand trembled as she reached for the coins in the tin cup, not to give, but perhaps as a shield against the vulnerability she hadn't anticipated. Her eyes, wide and pleading, searched his, silently asking if she could trust him, if he would judge her, if he would abandon her, as the world had seemed to do. Ethan stepped forward, finally closing the distance. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. The simplest act of proximity, of presence, spoke louder than words. He extended a hand, not to scold, not to demand, but to acknowledge her existence, to recognize her struggle, to offer a bridge across the painful years. Melissa's breath caught, She looked at the hand, then at his eyes, and something shifted. Fear mingled with relief. Guilt mixed with hope. A tear escaped, tracing a glistening path down her cheek. And for the first time in 12 years, the invisible walls they had built around themselves began to tremble. Ethan felt the tug in his chest, the same pull he had felt the moment he recognized her, a mix of sorrow, longing, and an unexpected surge of compassion. He wanted to know everything, to understand, to forgive, to mend. But that would have to wait. For now, it was enough that she was here, alive, and that the spark of connection still existed, fragile yet undeniable. And in that moment, standing amidst the indifferent crowd, with the hum of life swirling around them, two souls paused, broken by time, scarred by circumstance, yet tethered by a bond that neither pain nor absence could erase. Her eyes, wide with a mixture of disbelief and hope, met his. The world tilted, shifted, and for the first time in over a decade, the past and present converged into a single, fragile heartbeat of possibility. The chill of the late autumn afternoon bit deeper now, but Ethan hardly noticed. His focus was entirely on the woman crouched before him, Melissa. The world around them blurred. Shoppers bustling past, the distant jingle of mall doors, a child laughing somewhere near the food court. Nothing mattered except the fragile, trembling figure whose presence had resurrected a ghost from his past. Melissa sat frozen, her hand hovering near the empty tin cup, the coins clinking softly as she tried to compose herself. Ethan didn't move immediately. He needed a moment to anchor himself. 12 years of unanswered questions, heartache, and confusion pressed down on him like a physical weight. He had rehearsed what he might say, in dreams, in lonely nights of longing, and now none of those words seemed adequate. Finally, he took a cautious step forward, lowering his voice to a near whisper. The single word carried the weight of 12 years. She flinched, as if the sound itself could wound her. Her eyes darted around nervously, a survival instinct long honed on the streets, making her hyper-aware of every passerby. And yet, the pull of familiarity was undeniable. She looked at him, searching his face as though she hoped to find judgment, or perhaps forgiveness, in his eyes. I didn't know how to stay, she admitted, her voice breaking, trembling like a candle flame in the wind. I thought, if I stayed, I'd ruin everything. Ethan's chest tightened. He could hear the cracks in her voice, the tiny fissures of guilt that had been building inside her for more than a decade. And somehow, he understood, even though a part of him still ached with anger. His mind drifted back to the last time he had seen her, summer of 2013. They had been inseparable, two teenage hearts convinced they could outrun the world. There had been sunlit days spent sprawled on grassy fields, laughter echoing across the park, and whispered promises beneath the old oak tree by the lake. He remembered her smile, bright and mischievous, the way she had tucked her hair behind her ear when she was embarrassed, the warmth of her hand in his. And then, the silence. The locker he had opened one morning to leave a note was empty, her books gone, her jacket missing, the smell of her perfume lingering like a ghost. Ethan had called, texted, begged friends for answers. Nothing. Not a word, not a clue. The pain of abandonment had dug deep, planting roots in his heart that grew into distrust, anger, and a hollow emptiness he had never been able to fill. Yet here she was, broken, ragged, and yet still unmistakably her. He took another cautious step forward. Melissa, you have to tell me. Her eyes glistened with unshed tears. She swallowed, struggling to form words against the weight of guilt and shame she had carried alone for so long. Ethan froze. Joey, the little brother he had adored as a teenager, the one she had always babysat with meticulous care. A memory stabbed at him, vivid and painful. Joey's laughter, the way he clung to her side, the gentle, trusting smile of a child who adored both of them. Ethan's voice was tight, almost a whisper, but firm with urgency. Her hands trembled as she gripped her knees. He, he was hit by a car that night. I was supposed to be watching him. Just for a few minutes. I turned away, Ethan, just for a second. And he... Her voice broke completely, and she buried her face in her hands. Ethan felt the air leave his lungs. Rage, heartbreak, confusion, they all collided inside him, a storm threatening to pull him under. For a moment, he wanted to yell, to demand the impossible, but he didn't. He only stood there, silent, letting the weight of her confession hang between them. Melissa's voice came again, barely audible. I thought I'd killed him. Not really, but I blamed myself. Every day. I couldn't face anyone. I couldn't face you. I thought disappearing was better.
Her honesty was raw, unfiltered, cutting deeper than any accusation or misunderstanding from the past. Ethan's own chest ached, not with anger anymore, but with the profound ache of understanding. 12 years of misplaced blame, of bitterness, of sleepless nights haunted by her absence, gone. All of it dissolved in that moment, replaced by something heavier, sorrow for her suffering. He remembered the calls he had made, the nights he had cried himself to sleep, wondering what had happened to her. All this time, she had been carrying a burden that had nothing to do with betrayal. And yet, the pain was real, for both of them. Ethan crouched down slightly to meet her eyes, the cool concrete scraping his knees, and tried to steady his voice. Melissa, you were 16. You couldn't have known how to handle that. Her gaze wavered. Pride, shame, and vulnerability warred within her. I thought I deserved to disappear, she whispered again. Ethan shook his head, almost in disbelief at her words. Love isn't something you earn or deserve, he said softly. It's a choice, and sometimes it's forgiveness, too. Her tears spilled freely now, and for a moment, the crowded, indifferent mall seemed to vanish. All that existed was the two of them, a boy who had loved too long, a girl who had suffered in silence, and the fragile thread of connection that refused to break. The tin cup lay forgotten on the ground. Ethan extended a hand, not with judgment, not with demands, but with the quiet, steadfast presence that had once made her feel safe. Melissa, let me help you, he said, voice low, steady. Please, let me be here. She flinched at the offer, the words stirring a mixture of hope and disbelief. Could this boy, the one who had loved her and been abandoned by her, still extend kindness after everything? Her fingers hovered over his outstretched hand, trembling. For the first time in 12 years, she allowed herself to hope that maybe, just maybe, there was a place for her in the world, and perhaps even by his side. A gust of wind rustled through the parking lot, lifting strands of her matted hair across her face. Ethan brushed them away gently, his hand hovering near hers, not demanding, just offering reassurance. You don't have to explain everything right now. The words, simple yet profound, struck her with an intensity she hadn't expected. All the fear, all the shame, all the years of running and hiding collided into a single, overwhelming realization: someone still cared. Someone still believed in her, despite the mistakes, despite the absence, despite the world that had seemed to turn its back on her. Melissa took a shaky breath, letting a single tear slide down her cheek. Slowly, hesitantly, she placed her hand in his. The touch was light, tentative, but it carried the weight of unspoken apologies, longing, and a fragile trust. Ethan squeezed gently. That one small act, fingers intertwined, palms brushing, was a bridge across 12 years of pain. He didn't know what would come next. He didn't know if she would forgive herself, if they could rebuild what had been lost, or if life would continue to challenge them in ways they couldn't yet imagine. But in that frozen moment, standing in the middle of a busy mall parking lot, two people who had once been whole together,
who had broken and carried scars invisible to the world, began the delicate work of reconnecting. The world, indifferent as it was, kept moving around them. Shoppers brushed past, children laughed, distant music played, but Ethan and Melissa existed in a bubble of suspended time. One heart-wrenching confession, one tentative touch, and a lifetime of pain was finally acknowledged. Ethan swallowed hard. He didn't speak. He just held her hand, letting her tremble, letting her cry, letting her know, without words, that the past could not undo what remained between them. And for the first time in over a decade, Melissa allowed herself to believe that survival wasn't just about hiding. Survival could also mean being seen, being acknowledged, and perhaps being loved again. The autumn sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the pavement. The mall lights flickered on in preparation for evening. But Ethan and Melissa hardly noticed. Time, as they had known it, had paused. And in that pause, the fragile threads of memory, love, pain, and hope intertwined, creating a tapestry neither of them could have imagined, yet one they would begin to unravel together. For now, the past had been confronted, the truth had been revealed, and the first steps toward healing had been taken, quietly, hesitantly, but irrevocably. The chill of the evening deepened as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the Riverwood Mall parking lot. Yet for Ethan Parker and Melissa Monroe, the fading light barely registered. Time, as they had known it, had paused. And in that pause, the fragile threads of memory, love, pain, and hope intertwined, creating a tapestry neither of them could have imagined, yet one they would begin to unravel together. For now, the past had been confronted, the truth had been revealed, and the first steps toward healing had been taken, quietly, hesitantly, but irrevocably. The chill of the evening deepened as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the Riverwood Mall parking lot. Yet for Ethan Parker and Melissa Monroe, the fading light barely registered. Time had folded itself around them, compressing 12 years of longing, heartbreak, and unanswered questions into a single moment of fragile reunion. Melissa's hand still trembled in his, but her eyes were fixed on the ground. Ethan felt the weight of silence pressing between them, thick with unspoken fears. Finally, he exhaled, breaking the fragile quiet. "Melissa, tell me everything," he said softly. "I need to understand." Her gaze lifted slowly. The hollow, haunted eyes that had once stolen his heart now reflected years of suffering, guilt, and survival against impossible odds. Her lips trembled as she spoke, voice barely audible. Ethan swallowed. He had expected a story of loss, maybe a brief explanation. He wasn't prepared for the torrent that followed. "I couldn't stay," Melissa continued. "Not after that night. Joey, he was everything to me. I was supposed to protect him, and I failed." She pressed a hand to her chest, as if trying to hold herself together. I couldn't bear to face the world, your world, my family's world." Ethan listened, chest tightening. He wanted to reach out, to grab her and tell her she hadn't failed, she hadn't betrayed anyone. But something in him feared breaking the fragile barrier she had built around herself. "I went from place to place, shelters, bus stations, people who didn't care, people who barely noticed me. I cleaned houses, did odd jobs. Sometimes I had enough to eat, sometimes I didn't. I got sick, I fell behind on everything. And I thought, if anyone ever knew where I was, they'd hate me for disappearing. They'd think I abandoned you, that I didn't care." Ethan felt his knees weaken slightly, the rawness of her confession stabbing at a part of him he had carefully guarded for years. The anger he had carried, the resentment, the sorrow, all of it was suddenly reframed. She hadn't left because she didn't love him. She had left because she had been trapped in a prison of guilt and survival. He reached out, brushing a loose strand of her hair from her face. His touch was gentle, not probing, not demanding, just steady. "Melissa, none of that was your fault," he whispered. "You were 16. You couldn't have handled what happened." She shook her head, a bitter laugh escaping her. "It felt like it was. Every day I woke up and remembered that night. The way Joey's little hand slipped through mine, the sound of the tires, the scream. I can't. I can't erase it. I thought leaving would, I don't know, protect me from myself and protect you from me. I thought I didn't deserve love. Ethan's heart twisted in a way he hadn't felt since seeing her that morning. The truth was raw, bleeding through every word. She hadn't lied, hadn't cheated, hadn't betrayed him. She had broken, and in breaking, she had run.
He swallowed hard. He wanted to ask the questions that had tormented him for 12 years. Why didn't you tell me? Melissa's gaze dropped. Because I didn't think you'd understand. I didn't think anyone would. I thought if I stayed, I'd ruin everything you had built. I didn't want to ruin your life. The revelation hit Ethan like a wave. Anger, sorrow, compassion, confusion, they all collided in his chest. For 12 years, he had carried the weight of her disappearance like a stone in his heart, believing betrayal. And now, the truth shattered the narrative he had built around it. She hadn't left him because she didn't care. She had left because she loved too much and hurt too deeply. He wanted to cry, he wanted to scream, he wanted to hold her and never let go. But words failed him. For once, silence was enough. They stood there, hand in hand, letting the cold evening air wrap around them. Melissa finally lifted her gaze to meet his. Her voice was small, almost fragile. Ethan's chest tightened. He wanted to tell her no, that he could never hate her, that love didn't vanish even in the face of 12 years of pain. But the words felt too fragile, too insufficient. Instead, he took a deep breath and said, simply, "No, I don't hate you. I wish I had known." Her lips trembled, and she blinked rapidly to hold back tears. "I wish that too," she whispered. The bustling mall parking lot seemed to shrink around them, irrelevant, inconsequential. The world had become something private, sacred, suspended in time. The only reality was their shared history and the pain that had lingered far too long. Ethan studied her face. The lines of struggle, the hollowed eyes, the slight tremor in her hands, they all told a story of survival. And yet, beneath it, he could see the girl he had loved, the spark of life and mischief, buried but not extinguished, waiting to be rekindled. "Melissa," he said carefully, "you don't have to face this alone anymore. You don't have to survive by yourself." Her eyes widened at the offer. The raw vulnerability in his tone, the steadiness of his presence shook something deep within her. Could she accept help? Could she allow herself to trust again after years of running, hiding, and carrying unbearable guilt? I don't know if I can," she admitted. Her voice was hoarse from years of silence and suppression. Ethan shook his head gently. "Deserve has nothing to do with it. This isn't about earning anything. It's about connection. You survived all this, and now you don't have to do it alone." A single tear slid down Melissa's cheek. The tension in her shoulders, the fear in her eyes, the walls she had built around herself, they all softened, just slightly, at his words. Slowly, tentatively, she nodded. Not a full commitment, not yet, but enough to signal that the impossible had begun, a fragile truce between past pain and present possibility. Ethan felt a mixture of relief and profound sadness. Relief that she was still here, that the truth had been revealed, that the narrative he had believed for so long of betrayal was false. Sadness for the years lost, for the suffering endured, for the harshness of life that had marked her so deeply. "Come on," he said gently, guiding her to her feet. She wobbled slightly, the weakness in her legs betrayed by years of hardship. "Let's get you somewhere safe, somewhere warm." Melissa's eyes widened, skepticism and disbelief flickering across her face. You do that?" Ethan didn't answer immediately. He simply extended his hand, steady, unwavering. She hesitated for a heartbeat, then placed hers in his. The gesture was small but monumental. 12 years of pain,
separation, and misunderstanding converged into a single, tangible moment of trust. As they walked toward the edge of the parking lot, Ethan glanced at her, studying the careful, cautious movements of a person who had learned to survive by avoiding attention. And yet, in her gaze, he saw a flicker of hope, fragile but undeniable, a spark that whispered that life could still be kind, that redemption was possible, that second chances might exist, even after years of suffering.
For Ethan, the revelation was complete. He understood now why she had left, why she had disappeared, why she had vanished from his life without a trace. It was not betrayal, it was survival, guilt, and fear. And with that understanding came clarity. He could no longer cling to anger or heartbreak. Compassion must lead the way. Love, tempered by understanding, could still exist. Melissa walked beside him, fragile yet real, a living testament to endurance. And for the first time, Ethan allowed himself to hope that the past might finally meet the present, not with accusation or regret, but with healing. The city lights flickered on as dusk descended, casting golden reflections across the pavement. The world, indifferent as it was, continued around them. But for Ethan and Melissa, a private universe had emerged, a universe in which truth had been unveiled, wounds acknowledged, and the first tentative steps toward reconciliation had been taken. And in that quiet, trembling space between despair and hope, both of them realized something profound. Survival was not enough. Life could still be beautiful, even after tragedy. Love could still exist, even after loss. And grace, quiet, unearned, unwavering, might finally be possible. The streets outside Riverwood Mall were quiet now, the glow of streetlights casting a gentle halo on wet pavement from the afternoon drizzle. Ethan guided Melissa carefully toward his car, her hands still wrapped around his, hesitant yet trusting, in a way that both terrified and moved him. She moved like a woman who had spent years surviving on instinct, who had learned to tread lightly on the world, invisible, cautious, wary of contact. The leather of the car seat creaked as she settled into the passenger side, her coat, thin, borrowed, and slightly worn, offering little protection from the cold. Ethan started the engine, the warmth of the heater slowly filling the car's interior. The hum of the motor, usually mundane and unremarkable, now felt like a promise, safety, stability, and the possibility of shelter from the storms of her past. Melissa drew her knees close to her chest, wrapping her arms around them, shivering not only from the chill, but from the intensity of emotion swirling inside her. Ethan studied her quietly. Every line on her face, every tremor of her hands, every downcast glance told a story of suffering, of endurance, of quiet heroism in surviving against odds most people would never understand.
"You don't have to be afraid," Ethan said gently, breaking the silence. "I'm not here to judge. I'm here to help. That's it." She swallowed, a lump forming in her throat. It's been so long," she whispered. Ethan nodded, understanding. Trust was a fragile thing, easily broken, painstaking to rebuild. "Then we'll start small," he said. "No expectations, just one step at a time. You just need to breathe right now." The car drove through the quiet streets of Michigan, headlights illuminating the familiar yet distant landscape. The world seemed to hold its breath around them, suspended in a fragile bubble of tentative connection. They passed street corners, diners, and homes that glowed warmly behind frosted windows. For Melissa, each light was a reminder of a world she had been kept from, a life that had carried on while she had struggled in silence. "Where?" she finally asked, voice small, almost hesitant. "To a place where you can rest tonight," Ethan replied. "A diner first. Food, warmth, somewhere safe. We'll talk later." She nodded slowly, shivering slightly less as she sank into the seat. Ethan could feel the tension in her shoulders start to ease, the first subtle sign that perhaps this was more than a fleeting moment of safety. It was the beginning of trust. They arrived at a small diner on the edge of the city, unassuming but clean, with warm yellow lights spilling onto the sidewalk. Ethan opened the door for her, and she stepped inside, her movements careful, almost hesitant, as if afraid of being too noticed. The warmth hit her immediately, soft, welcoming, and unfamiliar. The owner, an older woman with kind eyes, gave them a quick smile. "Evening, Ethan." He nodded. "Yes, and bring her whatever she wants." Melissa glanced at him, surprised. Ethan shrugged lightly, masking the deeper trust he had built over the years. "It's a long story. Just sit, eat." They found a quiet booth in the corner. Melissa sank into the seat, drawing her borrowed coat tightly around her. She glanced at the menu, hesitating, unsure of what to choose, unsure if she deserved anything beyond the scraps she had been surviving on. "Chicken," Ethan suggested. "Hot, nothing fancy." Melissa nodded, almost imperceptibly, and ordered a small bowl of chicken noodle soup and water. Ethan ordered black coffee. The diner's warmth wrapped around them, but it was the silence, the careful, tentative silence, that carried the most weight. As Melissa ate slowly, Ethan studied her. The way she held the spoon with trembling hands, the slight wince at each movement, the hollowed eyes that still held traces of her old spark, it all told a story of survival, resilience, and the cost of years spent in hardship. "You've been through a lot," Ethan said gently, breaking the silence. "I can see it, but you're still here." Melissa looked down, her fingers tracing the rim of her bowl. "Incredible? I feel broken, lost. I've barely survived." Ethan's heart tightened. He wanted to reach across the table, to hold her, to let her know that survival was just the first step. "Living properly, it starts with small things," he said, "like food, warmth, sleep, like letting someone care for you. You've been doing everything alone for so long. Letting someone in doesn't make you weak." Melissa blinked back tears, a fragile smile forming. I forgot what that felt like. Being human. Being safe." "Then let's start there," Ethan said, "one step at a time. Tonight, you're safe. That's it. Tomorrow, we figure out the next step, and the next." The conversation drifted into quiet moments of shared memories, gentle laughter at trivial things, and the occasional pause as Melissa wrestled with vulnerability. Every word, every gesture, every act of care built a bridge across the chasm of 12 years. She had been living in isolation, in shame, and now someone was walking alongside her, not judging, not condemning, simply offering presence. After dinner, Ethan led her to a modest apartment he had arranged, a small guest room, clean sheets, a warm bed, and a closet where she could store her few belongings. Melissa hesitated at the threshold, scanning the room, almost as if expecting it to vanish, expecting to wake up back on the streets. This is yours," Ethan said softly, "for as long as you need it. No questions, no conditions." Melissa's lips trembled. Then accept it slowly," Ethan replied, "step by step." For the first time in years, Melissa allowed herself to feel safety. She unpacked a small bag she had been carrying, placed it neatly beside the bed, and sank onto the mattress. The warmth, the quiet, the absence of judgment, it was unfamiliar, yet comforting. Ethan sat in a chair nearby, not hovering, but close enough that she could reach out if needed. "Sleep if you can. We'll talk tomorrow," he said gently. Melissa nodded, exhaustion and relief mingling in her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. "You don't need to thank me," Ethan said softly. "You survived 12 years on your own. Let me help you now." The night stretched quietly. Melissa drifted into a restless sleep, haunted by fragments of past nightmares, but for the first time, she had a safe space to face them. Ethan watched her for a moment, heart heavy with compassion, guilt for all the years of misunderstanding, and hope for what could come. In the days that followed, Ethan helped her navigate the world she had been shut out of, applying for therapy, connecting with local support groups, finding opportunities to rebuild confidence, and slowly, gently, encouraging her to step back into life. Every small victory, a warm meal, a successful conversation, a shower without fear, was a step toward reclaiming humanity she had been denied. Melissa began to smile more, Cautiously, timidly at first, she laughed quietly at small jokes, her voice regaining strength, her presence slowly asserting itself. Ethan watched, heart swelling with relief and quiet joy, realizing that compassion, patience, and unwavering presence could begin to heal even the deepest wounds. And in those small, intimate moments, quiet evenings, shared meals, whispered conversations under the soft glow of a lamp, they began to rediscover the connection that had been fractured but never broken. Trust was tentative, but growing. Hope was fragile, but alive. And the possibility of love, once abandoned, lingered in the spaces between them, waiting to be nurtured. For Ethan and Melissa, the acts of compassion were more than gestures. They were lifelines, bridges over a decade of pain, and the first tangible steps toward a future neither had dared to imagine.
Ethan watched all of it, heart swelling with a mix of pride, tenderness, and the quiet ache of years lost. She had begun to heal, and in doing so, she had begun to rediscover herself. The girl he had fallen in love with, tempered now by experience, resilience, and a quiet grace that came only from surviving unimaginable hardship. One evening, they sat on the porch, the sky a deep purple-orange canvas above the city. Melissa had wrapped herself in a thick blanket, sipping hot tea, and Ethan had his hands wrapped around a steaming mug of coffee. The world seemed to have shrunk to the wooden porch, the stars above, and the shared silence that was no longer heavy but comforting. "I never thought I'd feel this again," Melissa said softly. "Safe. Seen." Her words trembled, and Ethan felt them resonate in his chest. "You are safe," he said gently. "You are seen." She glanced at him, eyes wide and uncertain. Ethan smiled, faint, sincere, a reflection of all the emotions he had tried to bury. "I never stopped loving you," he admitted. "I buried it under pain, confusion, anger, but it was always there. And now, I want to be here, with you." Melissa's lips trembled, and tears welled in her eyes. "I don't know if I deserve this," she whispered. "I've been broken for so long. I've carried shame like a second skin." Ethan reached for her hand, brushing the stray strands of hair from her face. "This isn't about deserving," he said softly. "It's about grace. Sometimes life doesn't give second chances because we deserve them. It gives them because we need them. And I think we both need this." She blinked back tears, allowing herself a small, fragile smile. For the first time in 12 years, she felt a warmth that had nothing to do with survival or necessity. It was hope. It was trust. It was the quiet whisper of love, patient and unwavering. Days turned into weeks, and Melissa's confidence began to grow. Therapy sessions became a space for her to confront guilt, shame, and memories long buried. Ethan was there, quietly supportive, never intrusive, simply a constant presence, a reminder that the world could be safe and love could be patient. One chilly evening, they walked through the park where they had once shared carefree teenage summers. Leaves crunched beneath their feet, the air crisp and scented with autumn. The world had not been gentle to them, yet somehow it had led them here, to each other, to a place where broken hearts could begin to mend.
Melissa paused by the old oak tree, the same one where they had once carved their initials into the bark. She ran her fingers along the weathered wood, tracing the faint letters, almost absent beneath time and growth. Ethan watched her quietly, heart heavy with emotion. I remember this," she whispered. "We thought this tree could hold everything. Our promises, our dreams, everything." Ethan reached for her hand, lacing their fingers together. "We still have it," he said, softly. "Not the same tree, not the same kids we were, but us. Now. We can start again." Melissa turned to him, tears spilling freely now, but not of sorrow. Tears of relief, gratitude, and emerging joy. You never gave up on me," she said. "Even when I ran, even when I left." "You were always worthy," Ethan replied firmly. "You just didn't see it, but I did." The air around them seemed to hold its breath as they stood beneath the oak tree.
hands entwined, hearts cautiously reaching toward each other. There was no grand declaration, no dramatic kiss, no cinematic moment of perfection. Just two souls, fragile yet resilient, acknowledging the past, embracing the present, and daring to hope for the future. I don't know if we can fix everything, Melissa admitted, but I want to try. Ethan smiled, a quiet, steady expression that held both joy and relief. Then we start now, one day at a time, no pressure, no expectations. And in that simple, profound commitment, both felt a weight lift, the weight of years lost, pain endured, and love unspoken. Grace, finally, had found them. The days that followed were not perfect. There were struggles, setbacks, moments of doubt. But each time, Ethan and Melissa faced them together. Compassion became the bridge over fear. Understanding became the language of love. And slowly, tentatively, the cracks in their hearts began to mend. One crisp morning, Melissa walked to the nearby coffee shop alone for the first time in years. She carried a small notebook, scribbling thoughts, plans, dreams. She smiled at the barista, feeling warmth, connection, and belonging. When she returned, Ethan was waiting with a small, shy smile. "You're doing it," he said softly. Melissa laughed quietly, a sound that felt like sunlight after a storm. "I'm learning, slowly, but yes." Ethan took her hand, holding it with care, reverence, and love. "No, thanks to you. You survived, you fought, you chose to keep going." And as they sat together, watching the city wake, sharing quiet conversation, laughter, and the simple intimacy of presence, both realized that life could indeed offer second chances, not because they were earned, but because grace existed in quiet, unassuming moments. Melissa leaned her head on Ethan's shoulder, eyes closed, finally allowing herself to rest, not as a survivor, not as a shadow of her former self, but as a woman who had endured, who had been seen, and who had been given the chance to love again. Ethan kissed her forehead softly, whispering, "Welcome back, to life, to love." In that instant, 12 years of heartache, longing, and unspoken truths melted into something new: hope, healing, and the promise of a future shaped not by mistakes, but by compassion, grace, and second chances. And as the sun rose over the city, golden and unwavering, it shone on two hearts, broken, mended, and now ready to face the world together.